Welcome back to the Thermo Diet Podcast. I'm your host, Jayton Miller, and today I'm going to do a solo podcast for you guys. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the nuances of serotonin and how we can get rid of serotonin whenever it is in excess in the system, which whenever it comes to most people, they do tend to have a little bit of excessive serotonin levels within the body. And so 90% of serotonin is produced within the digestive system. That's why it's called the second brain, is because so many of the neurotransmitters are produced inside of the gut. And so serotonin is synonymous with high endotoxin levels and various other issues. And so it's actually been seen that whenever there's an excess of serotonin in the peripheral tissues, that you see an increase in things like insulin resistance, diabetes, an increase in waist circumference, and things like that. So we want to make sure that we keep serotonin in check. It is still a necessity to a certain extent, but a lot of people tend to have too much. And so whenever it comes to serotonin specifically, some of the reasons that it is a necessity is for sleep. So serotonin actually gets converted into melatonin, and then melatonin is basically the trigger for sleep. So it pulls the trigger for sleep, and then the actual bullet for sleep is called GABA. So gamma amino, if I can say it correctly, gamma aminobutyric acid is what GABA is, and that is actually what allows you to relax and stay asleep through the night. It's not actually melatonin. So we don't want high levels of melatonin in the system because it can be inflammatory, as it is a pituitary hormone, and those tend to be a little more inflammatory than other hormones. And so whenever it comes to sleep, we want to have GABA levels specifically. We don't necessarily need to focus on melatonin levels. However, the conversion of serotonin to melatonin is triggered by darkness. And so that's why in a lot of cases in the metabolic perspective of health, darkness is seen as a stress. And then that's why we sleep at night, is to get through that stressful time, because light is actually what triggers the use of energy. And then for certain wave frequencies, and then other wave frequencies from light actually allow for the production of energy. And so it's very important to make sure that we sleep throughout the night so we're not stressing our bodies. That's also one of the reasons why whenever you work night shifts, typically we see an increase in health issues that begin to arise. So, we want to make sure that if we have the choice not to be working at night, to sleep throughout the dark period, and then wake up fresh and ready to go the next day. But how to get rid of serotonin. So there's many different ways that you can begin to downregulate serotonin in the system. The first is by decreasing the amount of tryptophan that you eat throughout the day. And so tryptophan specifically is a precursor to serotonin. So the more tryptophan that you have in your diet, the more serotonin that you're going to have in your diet. And the highest sources that I typically see in people's diets are poultry, and typically different kinds of pork too. So specifically whenever it comes to chicken, turkey, and then pigs, or the egg white. So if you're eating a bunch of eggs, you want to make sure to mitigate the amount of egg whites that you're eating, because they are high in tryptophan as well. What you can do to actually displace a lot of the tryptophan that's in those meats is to add glycine to those high tryptophan containing meats. It'll actually help displace the glycine. Same thing for the branched chain amino acids. They'll actually help displace the tryptophan in the system as well. So we don't see as much of that actually causing issues inside of the system. And so you can do that with collagen or bone broth and gelatin. Gelatin is what I usually like to use because it's straight and it's easy to eat, especially whenever you mix it into your food. However, here at Umzu, we do have a really good bone broth powder that I tend to sprinkle on pretty much all of my meat, not even just the poultry or the pork, but I put it on everything. I love it. And so I highly recommend doing that. And then, if you want to do the branched chain amino acids, they're actually high in different kinds of dairy derivatives. You can also supplement with a little bit of branched chain amino acids. And the branched chain amino acids, for those of you who don't know, are leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And so you can get different kinds of supplements with it. If you do get just plain branched chain amino acids, they taste really bad. So I recommend getting that from food sources so you don't have to suffer through that terrible taste. Another way to lower serotonin inside of the digestive system is to supplement with a little bit of activated charcoal 1 to 2 times a day. And so what this does is activated charcoal is a chelator, which is going to attract the different charged molecules, I guess, inside of the digestive tract and pull them out. However, you don't want to supplement it with more than twice a week, because whenever you do that, you will create micronutrient deficiencies, because it will chelate everything, not just the things that you're trying to target. It'll also chelate zinc, magnesium, sodium, potassium, calcium, anything that it comes into contact with, it's going to pull out of the system. So you just want to supplement with it about 1 to 2 times a week to lower the amount of gram-negative bacteria that you have in the system, and to pull out the amount of serotonin that you have in the system. Another reason that would be good to lower the amount of serotonin in the system is if you're struggling with high amounts of estrogen. So estrogen and serotonin levels are synonymous. So if you have high estrogen levels or if you have high serotonin levels, one or the other is also going to be high too. And it's a positive feedback loop. So the more that you have of the other one, the more that it's going to be feeding the increase of the other one as well. And so we want to make sure to block that by eliminating endocrine disruptors, mitigating the amount of estrogenic foods that we take in, supplementing with a little bit of activated charcoal, mitigating the amount of tryptophan that we get into the diet, supplementing with high gelatinous containing proteins or high glycine containing proteins, and then making sure that you supplement with a little bit of BCAAs or get that from different dairy derivatives. And then what you can also do is align your circadian rhythm in a way that promotes you to go to sleep whenever it is dark. This is going to be very important, because if you are not sleeping whenever it's dark, then you're typically going to be stressing your body out, because your melatonin levels are going to be a little bit high, because that serotonin is being converted into melatonin. And that becomes extremely inflammatory and begins to degrade the system and throws the whole body out of whack. So if you can align yourself to go to sleep as close as possible to whenever it's dark, and then wake up as close as possible to whenever the light comes up, that's going to be optimal in terms of mitigating the negative effects of not only serotonin, but melatonin as well. And then making sure that you regulate blood sugar is going to be another important thing to do, because as stress hormones rise, serotonin is going to rise as well. And so whenever you do not have sustained blood sugars throughout the day and you begin to experience a blood sugar crash, cortisol and adrenaline will spike. And whenever cortisol and adrenaline spike, you tend to see an increase in free fatty acid deposition into the bloodstream. So we have an energy source to be used until we get more glucose into the system. And usually whenever we see cortisol and adrenaline rise, serotonin and estrogen will rise as well. I would also make sure that you do that for liver health as well, because if your liver is not functioning optimally, then you're not going to see very good hormonal effects from an optimal functioning liver. So if your liver is damaged, you're typically going to see an increased amount of endotoxin in the bloodstream. You're going to see an increased amount of serotonin in the system. You're going to see an increased amount of estrogen in the system. So making sure that the liver is healthy so it can deactivate or metabolize those different compounds is going to be very important. Some other kind of anti-serotonin type of compounds is ashwagandha. Ashwagandha has actually been shown in several studies to be able to be just as effective as some antidepressants. And so I'm not saying to hop off of your medications. If you're working with a doctor, please make sure that you work with them closely anytime that you take some kind of drastic change like that. But this is one reason that you see many people who begin to supplement with high amounts of ashwagandha have a more positive outlook on life in general, is because it does have an antidepressant type effect from the anti-serotonin effect, or at least from what I've seen, that's what it looks like. Now, also, what you can do to increase the amount of serotonin in the system is increase the amount of protective hormones that you have, because those also tend to have an antidepressant effect as well. So the more DHT, testosterone, progesterone, pregnenolone, and DHEA that you have in the system, the less serotonin, the less serotonin that you're going to have in the system, and less estrogen that you're going to have in the system, wreaking havoc. And so these are just some of the ways that you can downregulate serotonin. Also, if you want to, and that is systemic serotonin specifically, so that's going to downregulate the amount of peripheral serotonin and central nervous serotonin. And then if you want, and I am not condoning the use of any kind of illegal substance. However, psilocybin and LSD are both known to downregulate the amount of central nervous serotonin as well. So if you happen to have any kind of chance to go to Johns Hopkins University and experiment with that, that's typically what's happening with a lot of those patients. The serotonin is being downregulated greatly. So I highly recommend looking into those studies and seeing if you can get in on them. But I'm rambling at this point, so I'm going to stop. Thank you for everyone who listened. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if you haven't already. Hop into the Thermo Diet group. We have tons of people killing it on the Thermo Diet, and I will talk to you next time. Have a good one. Thanks again for listening to the Thermo Diet podcast. Make sure if you haven't already to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave us a review. It helps us out a ton.